Hi, welcome to LearnStroke IAS classes by Arjun. You're listening to the daily Hindu news analysis for IAS current affairs with Arjun R Shankar. Today's date is December 3, 2022. Let's check out the important news leads of the day. The first important news is ISRO scientist frame up Supreme Court quashes official bail. So the Supreme Court has quashed the Nambinarayan case. Ex-scientist was given a clean sheet by the CBI in the espionage case. So everybody knows Nambinarayanan, and this is important from GS paper 2, governance court cases, etc. So Supreme Court has quashed the anticipatory bail granted by the Kerala High Court to former police and intelligence officer, including the retired Kerala DGP CB Matthews, accused of being part of a conspiracy to frame ISRO scientist Nambinarayan. So a bench led by Justice M.R. Shah remitted the anticipatory bail, and the court directed the High Court registry to list the case before High Court bench within a week. So the CBI, which had appealed the bail in the top court, claimed the possibility of a larger conspiracy involving foreign powers, which had stalled the technology to develop the cryogenic engine decades ago. So read this case from the ISRO case, the spy case, and see how Supreme Court is reacting in this context. Moving on to the second important one, Supreme Court commenting on collegium decisions is a fashion for ex-judges. So this basically talks about GS paper 2, polity governance, and especially regarding the collegium system of appointment of judges of Supreme Court and High Court. So now there is a big fight going on between the Supreme Court and the government regarding the appointment of judges. So in this, a lot of debates are coming in regard to the collegium system, the importance of collegium system, and that is the reason why Supreme Court said that many of the ex-judges came up, and that has become a fashion to former judges to comment on the earlier decisions of the collegium when they were part of it. And it's read it from the perspective of collegium system, GS paper 2. Next is learn Tamil books fly off the shelves in the Kashi stall. This is also important regarding the exhibition in Banaras Hindu University where the Kashi Tamil Sangamam is happening. It is to be noted that many speakers are buying the Learn Tamil book, how to learn Tamil, because many of the people said most of the people travel to the southern part of India in search of jobs. So they face a language centric problem. That is why many of them are trying to read. And it's a good thing. And it is also important that the Prime Minister recently said that in the inauguration said that Tamil is perhaps the oldest language in the world. So read it from history, GS culture, GS1 perspective, and about the Tamil Sangam. Moving on to the next important I missed out one important news before we go on to this West Bengal plan. There is an important news regarding the Telangana gets 9,500 crore lithium ion battery factory. So before we move on to this, let's discuss the lithium ion battery. So you should know, what do you mean by the lithium ion factory? What do you mean by lithium ion battery? Because a lithium ion or Li-ion battery is an advanced battery technology that uses lithium ions as a key component of its electrochemistry. So this is a very important topic for GS paper 3, science and technology. And a lithium ion is an advanced battery technology. In part because lithium's small size, because it is third only to hydrogen and helium, the Li-ion batteries are capable of having a very high voltage and charge storage per unit mass and unit volume. And the Li-ion batteries can use a number of different materials as electrodes also. And the most common combination is that of lithium cobalt oxide, the cathode, graphite, which is the anode. And the most commonly found in portable electronic device such as cell phone, laptops, the Li-ion batteries are very popular. So read it from GS paper 3 perspective. What do you mean by lithium ion battery or Li-ion? And the Telangana government is going to start a big lithium ion battery factory. So this also brings us the importance of the Li-ion batteries. Next was West Bengal power plants failed to curb sulfur emissions. GS paper 3, environment pollution aspect. This is very important because you know that not a single coal-based thermal power plant in West Bengal has installed something called as FDG. What do you mean by FDG? It is flue gas desulfurization. So let's discuss what do you mean by FDG or flue gas desulfurization. And there is also an important topic which is discussed called as the DSI, or what do you mean by direct sorbent injection technology? Again from GS paper 3. And I have got a mains question for this from GS paper 3. You can read this question. There is a lack of seriousness in controlling pollution at the source of electricity generation stations, leading to increasing emission load and contribution to air pollution from the power sector. How can it be solved? Discuss. So there is a lack of seriousness in controlling pollution at the source of electricity generation stations, which is leading to high air pollution. So how can it be solved? So this whole article talks about FDG. So what do you mean by FDG? The flue gas desulfurization is a set of technology used to remove sulfur dioxide or SO2 from exhaust flue gases of fossil fuel power plants and from the emissions of other sulfur oxide emitting process such as waste incineration. Since stringent environmental regulation is limiting SO2 emissions, many countries SO2 is being removed from FDG or flue gases by variety of methods. And so what are some of the common methods of FDG? Some of the common methods can be wet scrubbing, spray dry scrubbing, and wet sulfuric acid process recovering, and SNOxy, the SNOx flue gas, the FDG, and something called as dry sorbent injection system is also another technology. So dry sorbent injection technology introduce powdered hydrated lime or other sorbent material into exhaust ducts to eliminate SO2 and SO3 from process emissions. So the DSI is another technology which is actually introducing hydrated lime to eliminate SO2 and SO3 from emissions. So it's a very important article from GS paper, GS paper 3 perspective. You have to know all this technology, and it is also to be noted that both state-run power plants and private sector plants, power generating units, have shielded away, have gone away from installing such sulfur dioxide emission techniques. So there is a serious lapse in majority of the cases, which we have to find out. Moving on to the next important thing, as Haryana government issue notice on stone crushers failed to meet primary aim. So this brings us to another important question called, what is the stone crushing industry? Because the Haryana government talks about the stone crushing industry. So you need to know that stone crushers, because the stone crushing industry have become a major source of fugitive emissions owing to their extremely polluting process of crushing stone into smaller size stones or powder. You can just see in the picture the powder that they create and the smaller stones that they create. It is creating a big time fugitive emission, which is creating environmental damage. So, and this sector suffers from a very poor infrastructure, and even with the slightest wind or movement of vehicles inside the plant, enormous amount of dust pollution happens in the atmosphere. So definitely stone crushing is a very important industrial sector in the country, but the infrastructure need to be created. So the various activities like roads, highways, bridges, buildings, canals use this stone crushing industry. So that is why, in order to prevent these emissions, the Pollution Control Board has already evolved emission standards and guidelines in 1989, and it is actually protected under the Environment Protection Act 1986 by the Ministry of Environment. So that is also very important in this regard. Now let's move on to the next important news as Lakshman Karandikar appointed part-time chairperson of NSE. So this brings us, what do you mean by NSE? The NSE is National Statistical Commission of India, and recently Rajiva Lakshman is actually appointed under this. So what do you mean by NSE? NSE is basically an autonomous body formed in 2005 under the recommendations of Dr. C. Rangarajan Commission. So NSE is an autonomous body created. And what is the objective? The objective of NSE was to reduce the problems faced by statistical agencies in the country with respect to collection of data and strengthen public trust in the numbers released by the Government of India. So Government of India releases a lot of numbers, data. So it is basically involved in the collection of data. So read it from that perspective. NSE is National Statistical Commission of India. Very important from GS paper 2, regulatory body and government bodies, etc. So NSE is an autonomous body. So read it from that. Moving on to the next important article is protect glacial period coastal red sands dune of Vishakhapatnam. Very, very important article from GS paper 1 history and GS paper 1 again geography perspective. The city of Vishakhapatnam is blessed with a number of sites that have got geological importance, and this brings us a number of questions. What do you mean by red sand dunes? It is popularly known as the Eramatti Dibbalu. Sorry for if I'm mispronouncing it. It's Eramatti Dibbalu. And what is geological time scale? And what are the geo-heritage sites? And what is the Geological Survey of India? So this article discusses a lot of things about many of these concepts. So in Vishakhapatnam, one of the coastal red sand dunes is known as the Erramatti Dibbalu. The site is located almost 20 kilometers from Vishakhapatnam, and the article talks about geological time scale. What do you mean by geological time scale? The geological time scale is a representation of time based on the rock record of Earth. So rock record is actually taken. It is a system of chronologically dating that uses the chronostratigraphy and the geochronology. That means the rock record is actually taken. And finally, the geological time scale is the history of the Earth broken down into four spans of time. What are the four spans of time? Like the Precambrian time, the Paleozoic era, the Mesozoic era, and the Cenozoic era. So it talks about various things, and it also talks about geo-heritage site. What is a geo-heritage site? The Geological Survey of India declares geo-heritage sites or national geological monuments for protection and maintenance. So just like we have the World Heritage Sites, we have the geo-heritage site. And what is Geological Survey of India, or the GSI? It was set up in 1851 in the British time to find coal deposits for the railways. So in the presently, the GSI is attached to the Ministry of Mines. So this can be used for the prelims question. So when you talk about the red sand dunes area, the Erramatti Dibbalu, it is protected by the Andhra Pradesh government, and this site has significance because it is geologically, archaeologically, and anthropologically very important. And this period, this area, the Erramatti Dibbalu has seen both glacial and warm periods. So the sand deposits here are very rare, and they occur in the regions like terry sands in Tamil Nadu, and they do not occur in equatorial region and temperate region. So very important. Then you can see that the topography of this region has different geomorphical landforms like gillies, sand dunes, buried channels, pear terrace, the wave cut terrace, nick point, waterfall. So these are landformic features that you can find here. And the site historically is also representing the upper Paleolithic period. So a lot of history and geography involved in this. So this article is very important from this perspective. So please read it. Moving on to the important editorials. Here we go. The Indian politics needs a dose of new experimentalism. So this is a good article that discusses basically about this article starts with a Native American person called Deb Haaland, who is the first Native American cabinet secretary in the US Department of the Interior. So the Department of Interior once was very infamous for facilitating the killing, genocide of Native Americans. And that apparently now this department is looking almost 500 million acres of public land of which is connected to the Native Indian people. And it talks about various other young people from different parts of the country like Peru who are very young, who came into politics in a higher position as prime minister, chancellor at a very younger age. That is why India needs a new experimentalism. And similarly, like we talked about the Red Indians or the Native Indian people in America, it has also talked about the Indian president who hails from the tribal community. And it talks about the tribal communities, the tribal lawmakers from SC/ST categories are less than just 59%, and they do not have the right to ask many of the important questions in the legislatures and parliament. It also discusses what do you mean by anti-defection law. So the article discusses what is the anti-defection law, what is the 10th schedule, and what is libertarianism, and what is green politics. So the anti-defection definitely is very important. The 52nd Amendment Act 1985, it actually brings out the anti-defection law punishes individual members of parliament for leaving one party for another. and the parliament added it to the 10th schedule in the 1985 defection. So its purpose was to bring stability to governments by discouraging legislature from changing parties. So the 10th schedule is properly known as the Anti-Defection Act, was included by the 52nd Amendment Act, and gives the provisions for disqualification of elected members on the grounds of defection changing parties. And it talks about the concept of libertarianism. So what do you mean by libertarianism? Libertarianism is a political philosophy that advocates economic liberty and small state with limited regulation in democracy. So it's actually a great political philosophy that advocates economic liberty in a economic liberty. And it also talks about green politics. So green politics is also called as eco politics. It's a political ideology that aims to foster an ecologically sustainable society, but not always environmentalism. So it began to take shape in 1970s when there were a lot of green parties, and they were very successful. So green politics is basically an ideology to foster an ecologically sustainable society. So that is green politics. And I think I've also got a mains question here. Write it from a mature democracy, from GS paper to polity perspective. A mature democracy should see a greater diversity of ideology while offering representation to different socio-economic groups and stand away from nepotism. Critically analyze. A mature democracy should see greater diversity of ideology while offering representation to different socio-economic groups and stand away from nepotism. Critically analyze the statement. So it's a very important question. Moving on to the next important editorial is connecting India's East with the Indo-Pacific. This whole article talks about the Look East policy, Act East policy, and what is Look East policy and Act East policy, and how India's northeastern states should also be consulted and be made a stakeholder in the Indo-Pacific discussions. That is the important regarding this. And what is Look East and Act East policy? Because it is a diplomatic initiative to promote the Act East. Probably the Act East is a diplomatic initiative to promote economic, strategic, and cultural relations between Asia Pacific. And it was actually in 2014 that they announced it was an upgrade. The Act East policy was an upgrade of the Look East policy, because the Look East policy was at the time India sought to build a relationship between the USA and allies of USA in Southeast Asia. So that is why the former Prime Minister of India, P.V. Narasimha Rao, launched the Look East policy in 1992 to give strategic push to India's engagement with the Southeast Asia region. And 2014, the Look East policy was upgraded to the Act East policy. And it talks about various other issues. Like it talks about, the article basically talks about the northeastern issues also. Like there is a states, like states bordering Myanmar, Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, and Mizoram borders the state. GS paper prelims, you get this question: which are the following? Myanmar shares its borders with which are the following states? So Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, and Mizoram. And it talks about a lot of northeastern issues like insurgency, smuggling, trafficking, border issues, and police violence, and the insurgency, and lack of job creation, the university problems, and even the medical tourism of Manipur. It talks about various aspects of Northeast. And the other aspects are BIMSTEC. What do you mean by BIMSTEC? It is nothing but the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation. And it also says that, as I said, Northeast places should also be included in the lawmaking decisions. And that is very important aspect in this that is being discussed here. And moving on to the next important relation, this BIMSTEC, you need to know what do you mean by BIMSTEC. And out of the 7 members, 5 are from South Asia: Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and 2 are from Southeast Asia, Myanmar and Thailand. So they are the BIMSTEC people. So read all this from. And there is a new concept called Think and Relate East. Apart from Look East and Act East, what is Think and Relate East? That means in India, whenever we have a policy discussion, we should always think and relate from the Eastern perspective. So I have 2 questions for the mains. Moving beyond geopolitics and geoeconomics, India's neighbors should focus on the geocultural dimension of the Indo-Pacific. So everybody talks about war in Indo-Pacific region. We should be looking at the geocultural dimension. How do we do that? Then is the important concept of, like Look East and Act East, India should focus on think and relate east to make its voice heard in policies and take into the right path of economic development in the northeastern states. So how are we going to look east? We should have think and relate east to make the voices heard in the policies. So discussion. So these are important questions from GS paper to international relations and uh, international relations. Two questions. Moving on to the next important was the great responsibility. It talks about G20. So again, everybody is talking about G20 in the larger sector. So what do you mean by G20? We know India is going to light up a lot of monuments with the motto Vasudeva Kudumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. The article also discusses about what are P5 countries, what are the P5 countries, and also at a time, what do you mean by P5 countries or P5 plus one countries? Refers to the UN Security Council's five permanent members: China, France, Russia, UK, and United States plus Germany. The P5 plus 1 is also called as E3 plus 3 by European countries. E3 plus 3 and P5 plus 1 are same. So let's take a mains question here. At a time India itself faces economic distress and social communal tensions, the government should be ever prepared for G20 leadership. Discuss. So this is again a mains question for GS paper 2. Let's go to the next important thing. The editorial was moving around the concept of uh, there was another important editorial which has come up with the reverberations from blast in Mangaluru. So this talks about the Mangaluru blast and talks about the complete thing. And there was another editorial which I have not mentioned, that was regarding the on the boil, was regarding the Israel Palestine issue. And what is the West Bank issues? You should know what do you mean by the West Bank issue, what is the Israel Palestine issue. And the next, moving on to the very important national page, the Vice President questions judiciary's power to undo an amendment. GS paper 2, polity and governance. Very important. The article talks about the Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar has said the world does not know of any instance where a constitutional provision reflecting the will of people can be undone by the judiciary. That means again it is judiciary and the union government is getting into loggerheads. So the vice president did not explicitly name the constitutional amendment, but he meant that the National Judicial Appointment Commission or the NGAC through the 99th Amendment, you know that the Supreme Court struck down the National Judicial Appointments Commission and they want the collegium system. So he says that uh, please find out a parallel in the world where a constitutional provision can be undone. And what is Article 150? It also talks about what is National Judicial Appointment Commission and what is Article 145 Clause 3 in the Indian Constitution. And it also talks about what is universal adult franchise. So definitely the universal adult franchise refers that all citizens who are 18 years and above, irrespective of caste, education, religion, color, race, and economic conditions, are free to vote. So this is based on a universal adult franchise and is based on the idea of equality. And article, what is 145 clause 3? So the article provides that interpretation of the constitution when a substantial question of law is involved and can be done by the court. So when a substantial question of law arises, the article 145.3 discusses about the substantial question of law arisement. So that is very important in this regard. And another mains question for you: what is universal adult franchise? The introduction of the universal adult franchise was a revolutionary act at a time when it was extended to women, people of color, and the working class in mature Western democracies. Comment. So you need to know and why it is very important. You need to write about this from GS paper 2. Moving on to the next important one is Assam festival celebrates Barak Bangla relationship. So this again brings us to an important concept of where is Barak Valley and where is Silchar in Assam. So it is the 75th year of India's independence and liberation, and the 50th anniversary of liberation of Bangladesh from Pakistan. And the festival is celebrating the Barak Valley of Assam and the Sylhet segment of Bangladesh. So it is a good celebration. So Indian GS paper 2. The tourist guides to front unique India as an experience at G20 meeting. Nothing but in the G20 coming summits, more than thousands of tourist guides will be distributed across the G20, 55 locations where G20 meetings would be held in the next 1 year to facilitate foreign delegates and give them an Indian experience about history and culture. So again, GS paper 1 perspective. Next is tragedy within tragedy. Flight of doctors from Bhopal's main hospital leaves patient in the lurch. So this is again a very important article from GS paper 3, GS paper 2 health perspective, because the Madhya Pradesh High Court had directed the ICMR, the Indian Council of Medical Research, to fill in the vacant post of doctors and paramedical staff in the Bhopal Memorial Hospital Research Center, the BMHRC. So, the until a decade, the BMHRC was recognized as a national level super specialty hospital. But today it's a perfect example of a lack of vision, says article. So the article says it is actually created. It was actually a big support for the victims of the world's worst industrial disaster. So now it is having a lot of issues regarding the placements, the appointments, and the services that the hospital gives in. And previously, the article mentioned there used to be something called as the PPS, the private patient share, uh, when the amount when the hospital treats a non-gas victim. So it is a very important, because the specialist receives an incentive amount which was 2-3 times their salary. So where they treat a non-gas patient, so it was very good for both gas and non-gas patients. But the recent Supreme Court's verdict in 2010 to dissolve the trust and hand over the responsibility of operation to central government, a lot of things changed. The hospital is lacking a vision. The patients here are suffering a lot. So GS paper 2 health perspective. So next is an important article regarding the center to prioritize wages for NAREGA. So this is nothing but wages under the NAREGA Act are inordinately delayed. So this has created a big fund problem. So a lot of supervisors have given complaints that the wages under the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme are delayed. So what happens is there is a lot of workers are having a problem regarding this. So that is an important article. Next is India, US should hold a discussion on social challenges, says diplomat. And this is also very important, because India and US is having a frank discussion on social challenges. Because, a recent report of the US Commission on International Religious Freedom said that India was placed as country of particular concern, that India is having a violation in religion, persecution, etc. So that means India and USA should have a frank discussion on social challenges. GS paper to international relations. Next is a very important news item regarding women join protest in Zahedan, Iran's conservative southeast city. So this brings us an important city. Where is Zahedan? It is in Iran, because such questions appear in Match the Following for prelims. Where can you find Zahedan? It's in Iran. And the US names Al Qaeda unit Pak Taliban as terrorist. The US has added key anti-Pakistani militant group and its Al Qaeda branch to its list of global terrorists, triggering sanctions against the group. So the US is committed to using its full set of counterterrorism tools to counter the threat posed by terrorist groups operating in Afghanistan. So that's a good thing. The US has added a key anti-Pakistani militant group and its Al Qaeda branch. So that is an important international relations news. And moving on, bank credit grew almost 17% in fortnight. So this again is an article that is very important here. So what do you mean by the bank credit? The Indian banking system's outstanding credit grew by 16.9%. So the bank credit has grew. The credit means the loan. The bank credit is improved. So that is GS paper 3. And India said to continue buying Russian oil. So India will continue to buy Russian oil because sanctions allow purchases provided the Western services are not used. So it also brings us another question. What is G7 countries? It also talks about G7 countries, and India has emerged as the largest buyer of Russian oil behind China. So this is also very important. So India is continuing to buy Russian oil. So these are some of the most important news leads of the day. I hope you will read all of them and be updated in the current affairs. So subscribe to the channel LearnStroke IAS by Arjun, and keep listening to more news analysis with me. Thank you.